Some children never make it home, and some families never stop searching. When 8-year-old Clara Thomas vanished walking home from school, it seemed impossible. She had her routine, her route, and her loyal dog beside her. But 3 things still haunt those who followed the case. Why was her backpack found 2 weeks later in a place already searched? Why did the dog return there? And why had someone wanted her father silent? Before we begin, feel free to share where you're watching from in the comments. It's always meaningful to see how far these stories travel. And if you're drawn to powerful mysteries like this, be sure to subscribe. Every weekday at exactly 3:07 p.m., Clara Thomas walked out the side gate of Oak Hollow Elementary School in Springvale, Missouri. Her mother often joked she could set a watch by her daughter's footsteps. Same sidewalk, same sky blue uniform, same white Samoyed by her side, a dog named Milo who had been by Clara's side since she was in diapers. That Friday was no different. Bright sun, clean streets, nothing unusual. Clara waved to the crossing guard. A neighbor saw her smile at a classmate across the street. And then, nothing. By 3:45, when Clara hadn't arrived home, her mother checked her phone. By 4 o'clock, she called the school. They said Clara had left right on time. By 5:15, Milo came running home, alone, leash trailing behind him, his fur tangled with burrs. But Clara's backpack was gone, and the dog wouldn't stop pacing near the back gate. Clara's father, Ryan Thomas, wasn't just a quiet man who worked in logistics. He had once been a silent partner in a local development project that never broke ground. Several small investors lost money. But it wasn't until Clara disappeared that whispers about who had funded that project started surfacing. Ryan never said much, but in the days after Clara vanished, neighbors noticed something odd. 2 unfamiliar men had parked outside the family home more than once. One was seen taking photos. Another came to the door but left when no one answered. The police focused on Clara's school route. They questioned teachers, searched storm drains, called in search dogs, but Ryan was focused on something else, a voicemail he had received 2 nights earlier. The voice said only this: "You owe more than money, Ryan. Clean up or you lose more than numbers." And then it hung up. In the days that followed, Milo refused to rest. He scratched at the door constantly, whining toward the back gate, then toward the wooded lot behind the neighborhood. The police had already searched it, on day 2, with cadaver dogs and local volunteers. Nothing. But Milo kept pacing, nose low, tail tense. He wasn't aggressive, just alert, focused. On day 6, Ryan asked if Milo could be part of the search. At first, authorities dismissed the idea. They had trained dogs already. But the lead detective, a former K-9 handler, noticed something in Milo's behavior, the way he returned again and again to the same path, the same thicket near the edge of the trees. So they agreed to try. On the 11th day, Milo pulled so hard on his leash that his harness slipped. He ran directly into the woods and didn't come back for 5 full minutes. Then they heard barking, sharp, constant, low. Milo had led them into a patch of woods less than a quarter mile from the school route. It was a spot the initial search had already covered, or so they thought. At first glance, the clearing looked undisturbed, but Milo didn't pause. He beelined to a dense patch of tall grass, his nose to the dirt. Tugging and digging gently, he stopped at something. A school backpack, blue, dusty, torn slightly at the corner. The name stitched on the back strap, Clara Thomas. Inside were crayons, a notebook, and a pressed flower Clara had picked the morning she disappeared. But something felt off. The bag was too clean for having been in the woods for 11 days, and, most important, that section of grass had already been walked by volunteers on day 2. So how did the bag get there now? And why had Milo known exactly where to find it? Detectives noted that the contents inside the bag were dry and intact, despite 2 days of rain the week before. The soil around it had clearly been disturbed recently, as if the bag had been placed, not dropped. That alone would have raised questions. But what troubled Clara's parents more was what wasn't inside. Her lunch container, her water bottle, and her house key, which she never took off her bag zipper, were missing. The police now believed the bag was a plant, likely meant to mislead. But the question became, who would do that? And why now? Milo circled the area 3 more times, pausing at the tree line, nose twitching. Then he stopped, facing east, where a row of delivery trucks often passed from a local gravel site. It was there that they found tire tracks. But the pattern didn't match any search vehicle used by law enforcement. The tire tracks were clean, too clean, no overlapping from volunteer boots, no mud dragged from searchers, which meant the vehicle had been there after the first search. Investigators cast impressions and matched the tread to a commercial delivery van, but none of the neighborhood residents or business owners recalled seeing a delivery that day. No CCTV, no scheduled drop-offs, nothing. Still, a gravel path connected the woods to a nearby service road, quiet, easy to miss, and unmonitored. Ryan Thomas hadn't said much since the bag was found, but that night he made a call to the detective in charge. He told him something he hadn't shared before. "I think I know who has Clara, and I think they want me to run scared." He wouldn't say more. But the detective began digging into one of Ryan's old business deals, the one he'd signed without reading the second page. Years earlier, Ryan had invested in a commercial property deal, one he thought would be routine. But fine print later revealed that he'd unknowingly tied his name to a larger network of holdings under a shell corporation called Black Ridge Ventures. Publicly, the group no longer existed. Privately, it had been tied to multiple civil suits and hush money settlements in other states. One name from the LLC paperwork stood out: Colt Rivers, a man known for forcing settlements through unconventional pressure. The last known address for Rivers was in the next county over, just 40 miles from where Clara's bag was found. The next day, the police drafted a warrant to investigate one of Rivers' known storage properties, a large workshop tucked behind a livestock barn. But before they could enter, Milo barked and pulled toward the back fence. There, near a shed, was something hanging on the wire. Tangled in the rusted wire was a piece of cloth, faded but unmistakably blue. Milo lunged toward it, whining, as one officer gently pulled it loose. It was the collar of Clara's uniform dress, torn slightly, with a button still attached. Next to it lay a single black shoe, half buried in mud. The location was immediately sealed off and search dogs brought in. But strangely, Milo wasn't barking anymore. He sat beside the post, watching the shed, quiet, alert, like he was waiting. Inside the shed, police found tools, tarps, and an open notebook with shipping labels, none addressed locally. But one corner of the shed floor felt hollow. A false panel was removed, and beneath it, a staircase, narrow and steep, leading down into what appeared to be an unfinished root cellar. There was no sound below, but on one wall a child's drawing was pinned up. The cellar beneath the shed was just 6 feet deep, unfinished, lined with dirt, and clearly dug out over time. A single light bulb dangled from a wire overhead, and in the far corner sat a metal folding chair and a folded blanket. But it was the wall that stopped everyone cold. Pinned there were 3 pages from a children's notebook, crayon drawings, shaky and uneven, each showing a girl, a house, and a dog. One drawing showed the girl behind bars, another showed the dog digging under a fence, but the third showed nothing but trees. A clearing with a square outlined in red. The team brought Milo down, who immediately sniffed the floor, paced twice, then sat. It was a quiet signal, one used in scent training to indicate a familiar human presence. But there were no signs of Clara, only a single name written on the last page. Denny. Denny was a name Ryan hadn't heard in nearly 4 years. Dennis "Denny" Beckett had been a subcontractor on the failed development deal Ryan unknowingly signed with Black Ridge Ventures. He wasn't listed as management, he wasn't even an employee on paper, but he was the guy who showed up when collections got personal. The police pulled old property records and found that Denny had once rented land next to the current shed site, a mobile unit that had burned down in 2021 under what was deemed an electrical fire. Denny had vanished after that. No charges, no trace, until now. Fingerprints on the drawing pages matched his from a prior misdemeanor arrest in Kansas. But that arrest was 13 years ago, so why had he resurfaced? And more importantly, was Clara still alive? Milo suddenly paced toward a wall panel. Then he stopped. He began pawing the base. Behind the far wall was a second panel, thin and uneven. When officers pried it loose, they uncovered a crawl space just large enough for a child to lie down in. Inside were 2 water bottles, a half-empty pack of crackers, and a thin blanket. But no Clara. She had been there, probably not long ago, but she wasn't now. Still, something caught in Milo's mouth as he sniffed the edge. A fabric tag, torn from clothing. The stitching read, "Clara, Room 14. Room 14 wasn't from home. It wasn't from school. It was from the pediatric wing of a local hospital where Clara had stayed as a toddler during a brief illness. The tag had been from her favorite blanket, a blanket her mother had kept in a trunk upstairs. So how had it ended up here? Ryan finally admitted it. He had received another message, but he hadn't told the police. 3 nights after Clara vanished, Ryan found a small envelope taped to his windshield. No postage, no fingerprints. Inside was a photo of Clara standing in what looked like a garage or basement. She was pale, frightened, but alive. Behind her was a metal door and a string of lights. Scrawled on the back were 6 words. "You gave them my number." Pay Ryan had kept the message to himself. He had hoped to negotiate, to keep Clara safe, to fix this without involving more danger. But now, seeing Milo respond to the scent and the blanket, he realized how much time had been lost. He finally told the detective everything, about Denny, about the failed deal, about the threats. The team re-ran property searches for Denny and discovered a name not connected to Ryan at all. An old acquaintance Denny once listed as an emergency contact, a man named Paul Maddox. Paul Maddox owned a small rural home 90 minutes outside Springvale. No neighbors, no mailbox, no listed utilities. On paper, the land was empty, but satellite imaging from the past month showed fresh tire patterns and what looked like a second temporary structure behind the main house. Police dispatched a tactical team while Clara's family waited. Milo was brought along, not as a tracker now, but because by then everyone agreed he'd earned the right to be there. The front of the property was quiet, the house locked. No sound. But behind the trees, near a garden shed, Milo lunged forward again, or no hesitation this time. He barked once, then again, faster. Officers opened the shed door with a crowbar, and there, lying beneath a blue blanket, curled up but awake, was Clara, alive, quiet, and still holding the dog's worn leash in her small hand. Clara didn't cry when officers found her. She blinked against the light, flinched at the voices, but when she saw Milo, she moved. The little girl who had vanished 18 days earlier reached for her dog like no time had passed. Milo pressed against her, whining, tail flicking with restraint. He didn't bark, he simply stayed. Wrapped in a thermal blanket, Clara was carried to a waiting ambulance. Her vitals were weak but stable. A medic gently took the leash from her hand. Clara whispered something no one could quite hear. The medic leaned closer. "He knew I was close," she said. "I kept dreaming he'd find me." There were no cameras, no grand speeches, just a dog, a child, and the quiet breath of someone who made it home. But inside the house, officers found something that complicated everything, a printed photo of Clara's backpack in the woods. The photo showed Clara's backpack resting exactly as the officers had found it, but the timestamp embedded in the file revealed it was taken 2 days before the bag was actually discovered. That meant someone had staged the placement, waited, and photographed it to confirm. The question now wasn't just who planted the bag, but why. One theory quickly gained traction. The kidnappers knew Milo was still being used in the search. They knew he would find the bag, and that it would shift focus away from the real location, giving them more time to move Clara or prepare to abandon her. The misdirection had nearly worked. But Milo hadn't stopped at the bag. He'd returned again and again to the deeper trail, the one that led them toward the shed, then to the false cellar. Whoever planned this had underestimated 2 things: how long the dog would search, and how well he remembered her scent. Paul Maddox was arrested the next morning without resistance. He had been sleeping in the front room, unaware that Clara was no longer on the property. Inside the shed, they found food supplies, a roll-out cot, and handcuffs, used, according to Clara, to keep her from the door. Maddox denied everything, claimed he was just watching her for a friend, claimed the dog broke in. But text messages recovered from a burner phone told a different story. He had coordinated with Denny. He had updated him with movements of the police, and he had admitted to ditching the bag as planned. The third name on the messages, Colt Rivers, hadn't responded in days. But by the time the FBI arrived at Rivers' known location in Wyoming, the house had been cleared. No phones, no files, just one note left behind on the kitchen table. "Dogs remember, you people forget." At first, Clara didn't want to speak. Doctors said that was normal. Her body was recovering faster than her voice, but Milo stayed close, even in the hospital room. He was allowed in twice a day, and each time Clara smiled. Over time, pieces of the story came out. The man named Denny had picked her up in a white van. He'd said her dad was in trouble, that he needed to take her somewhere safe. She hadn't believed him, not really. But when he called Milo by name, she hesitated. She remembered being told not to scream. She remembered being driven around a lot, so she'd lose track of where they were. And she remembered the photo, the one Denny took of her in the basement. She asked the detective one thing. "Did Milo come find me because of that picture?" The detective only nodded. He didn't stop looking, Clara. The bag had been more than misdirection. It was designed as bait, not just for police, but for Milo. Authorities learned that a second leash had been purchased near the same woods with traces of tranquilizer inside the clasp. The plan had been to trap the dog, the same way they had tried to trap Clara. But Milo hadn't been fooled. He sniffed, circled, and avoided the area, then led officers further east, away from the clearing. Had he hesitated, even once, the trail might have gone cold. But Milo had known what the others didn't. Clara's scent didn't end at the backpack. It lingered in the air, in the dirt, and in the brush no one thought to recheck. The bag was meant to end the search. Instead, it pointed them toward the shed, and toward the man no one thought to look for. A man Clara called the one without a face. Clara's final drawing, handed quietly to a nurse on her 4th day in recovery, showed what she'd been too afraid to say out loud. 2 men, both blurry, one with a scar across his cheek. The other, nothing at all, no eyes, no mouth, just a blank oval. It was how children described someone they didn't want to remember, or had only seen once, from the shadows. Police believed it was Colt Rivers, the man with no digital trace, no clear photo, just rumors, forged contracts, and 2 other open investigations tied to coercion and disappearance. And Rivers had vanished. But one more detail from Clara's story chilled investigators. The man with no face had patted Milo on the head during the first abduction attempt. He'd let the dog sniff him, calmly, as if he knew that if they didn't take the dog too, they'd never be safe. While Clara recovered, investigators returned to the Maddox property for a final sweep. In a crawl space beneath the kitchen, they discovered a trap door, leading to what appeared to be a second, unfinished basement. There was no furniture, no insulation, just bags of rice, candles, and canned fruit stacked along the wall. In the corner, they found Milo's name carved into wood. It was a warning, or a ritual. Either way, it was clear Milo had been part of the plan, a threat they had accounted for. But something about the basement didn't sit right. Why build it? Why stock it? Clara had never been kept there. One theory emerged. It was a backup location, in case Clara needed to be moved, or in case another child ever had to be hidden. But before police could act, the landowner filed an eviction, and the house burned down 3 nights later. Accidental or cleanup? Weeks after Clara's safe return, Milo continued to pace at night. Same door, same window, same pull toward the backwoods. At first, Ryan thought it was habit, a leftover tension from the rescue. But on a quiet Wednesday morning, Milo slipped through the gate during a yard repair and disappeared for nearly an hour. When he returned, his paws were muddy, his fur flecked with thorns. Ryan followed the path and discovered Milo had returned to the original clearing, but not to where the bag had been found. Further east, near a rusted drainage pipe, was a patch of disturbed ground. Beneath a few inches of soil was a weatherproof envelope packed in plastic, with a phone and USB drive inside. Inside that drive, a folder of documents, names, bank wires, surveillance logs, and photos. Photos of Clara's walk home, taken on 3 different days before she disappeared. The documents on the USB were clear. This wasn't a spontaneous kidnapping. It had been planned. Clara had been watched. Her routines logged, friends documented, Milo photographed, even her bus number listed. But she wasn't the only one. 12 other names appeared in the folder, all young children in the Tri-County area, all with predictable school routes, all with family ties to legal disputes, political complaints, or money owed to development groups. Clara had been target number 7. The others? Some had moved, some changed schools, but none had been reported missing yet. The lead detective called it a blueprint, and Ryan, still shaken, asked the only question left. What happens when the dog finds more than just a trail? The FBI expanded the case. Multiple arrests followed. Denny Beckett was captured crossing into Colorado, but Colt Rivers remained a ghost. Until someone mailed in a photo. No return address. The photo was printed on old glossy paper, a single snapshot of a cabin deep in the pines with a black SUV parked outside and a figure in the doorway. It was dated, folded twice, and paper-clipped to a note that read, "Last chance to catch him before someone else erases him." The location was traced to northern Montana, hours from the Canadian border. When agents arrived, the cabin was abandoned, but inside they found 3 things. A half-burned notebook with lists of cities and children's names, a map marked with 12 red dots, one circled in Missouri, and taped to the wall a single photograph of Milo mid-run during the rescue scene, as if admired. The man they chased wasn't just covering tracks. He was studying responses, watching the helpers, testing what couldn't be bought. And in that moment, Ryan realized Milo hadn't just saved Clara, he had disrupted something far bigger. Back home, Milo rested more, but only slightly. He still waited near the door before dusk, still perked up when Clara entered the room, still paused every time a truck passed outside. He hadn't changed, he had simply adapted. Ryan began keeping a journal of Milo's behaviors, not because he didn't trust the dog, but because he finally realized how much Milo had been trying to say all along. There were notes from the night before Clara vanished. Milo had barked at something in the backyard around 2 a.m. They'd thought it was a raccoon, but Ryan now believed that was the first pass, the first scout. The same dark SUV had been parked just beyond the fence, waiting, watching. And Milo? He had known. But what they didn't realize then was that this story had already begun 2 weeks before Clara ever went missing. One of the 12 names on the USB drive belonged to a girl from Wayridge, 2 towns over. She hadn't been reported missing, but she had missed a week of school that fall. When detectives followed up, they found her home empty. The parents had relocated, according to a neighbor, after some legal trouble involving property liens. No forwarding address. But a gas station security camera from 4 months prior showed the girl walking with an older man, Denny Beckett. She wore a red jacket and carried a school bag. Police believe she was used to test movement and storage patterns. A live trial. There had been others before Clara, but unlike Clara, the girl had no Milo. No one noticed she was gone for days. And in that silence, the network had learned exactly how long it took for a child to disappear without a trace. Law enforcement rarely works off instinct, but Milo had forced a shift in their approach. Instead of waiting for digital trails, they began tracking animal responses, dogs who lingered near fences, pets barking consistently at the same hours, strange food wrappers tossed into yards to bait animals away. The network, whoever was still behind it, had been betting on time, misdirection, and silence. But what they hadn't counted on was emotionally bonded animals, dogs that didn't give up, that didn't need evidence to know what was missing. A quiet change occurred in Springvale. More families began walking home with their dogs. Neighborhood watches grew. Local schools added dog handling workshops. And Milo? He received a certificate of recognition from the state, though he never wore the medal they gave him. Because Milo wasn't finished, he still walked the back fence each evening, still paused when the wind changed direction. 2 months after Clara came home, Ryan received a call from an unknown number. No voice, just a recording, 11 seconds long. Clara's voice. He said if Milo barked, he'd come back, followed by static. Then the same whisper Ryan had heard once before. One was returned, but not all. Investigators traced the signal to a burner phone tower near Salt Lake City, the same region where another name on the USB list was last seen. The case had grown from a disappearance to a statewide task force, and Milo's discovery had cracked the entire pattern. But behind every photo, every fake delivery van, every planted bag, was the mind of someone still watching, still playing a game that relied on fear. And somewhere, in the spaces between threats and silence, was someone waiting to see who would break first. Milo didn't bark. He waited. The final thread came from a retired ranger who had heard Milo's story on a local radio station. He called quietly, left no name, but gave a detail no one had connected. In 2014, he'd helped authorities clear an abandoned cabin near a lake used by seasonal hunters. No crime reported, just rumors of trespassing. Inside, they found food wrappers, camera equipment, and dozens of trail maps, marked with X's near schools. It matched the photos on the USB, but back then, no one saw crime, just squatting, nothing illegal. Now, years later, the ranger returned, and the cabin was gone. Only foundation stones remained, but in the dirt beside the ruins was a dog collar, clean, new, never worn. It had a tag, not with a name, but with a phrase, "If found, he's still out there." When officers returned to the lakebed site where the collar had been found, they brought Milo. He didn't hesitate. He pulled toward a pine break about 300 yards east, where wind scattered the scent unevenly. There, beneath the edge of a dry stream bed, searchers found an old wooden crate, mostly decayed. Inside it were shredded blankets, a rusted chain, and a photo, water-stained but visible. It was Clara, smiling with Milo beside her. This photo had never been taken by her family. Its angle suggested distance, as though captured through a window or lens. This was confirmation. Someone had been close enough to see her with Milo in the days before she disappeared, and they had kept that image, not just as a plan, but as a marker of what Milo represented, not a threat, a mistake. A wild card in a game built on predictability, one that finally came undone. As the investigation deepened, analysts discovered a strange reference buried in encrypted messages between known shell companies. One word repeated often, Dog 7. At first, no one understood it. It wasn't a code for law enforcement or military operations. But one tech investigator recognized the structure. DOG7 was a call sign, part of a field protocol. It referred to a disruption variable, a wildcard, a loose piece that couldn't be accounted for by standard surveillance, AI prediction models, or pattern tracking. In short, a threat to control. Milo, and dogs like him, had become Dog 7. The messages had begun appearing months before Clara's abduction, which meant Milo hadn't disrupted the plan. He'd been on the watch list already, and someone, somewhere, had marked him as a risk to their entire operation. That list, when opened, showed other designations, Dog 2, Dog 5, and next to Dog 7, the word active. The case turned upside down when investigators realized the network hadn't just targeted children. They had mapped the people most likely to resist: dogs, teachers, counselors, coaches, even grandparents, anyone whose routines, empathy, or intuition made them a liability. A human Dog 7. The purpose became clearer: control the narrative early, discredit the noise, mislead the loyal. Milo had made too much noise. He didn't follow rules. He didn't work on timelines. He followed attachment, something no software could predict. And in that, he shattered the one thing the operation depended on: time. Every hour Clara survived was a failure in their system. And when she came home alive, it broke their trust in silence. Now authorities weren't just tracking people. They were tracking patterns of disruption. But someone else had already noticed, and they were watching back. 2 weeks before Christmas, Ryan stepped outside to get the mail and found an envelope. No stamp, no return address. Inside was a printed photo, glossy like before. But not of Clara. This one showed Milo, asleep beside the family fireplace. The angle suggested it had been taken through the front window, at night. But that wasn't the most chilling detail. Pinned behind the photo was a piece of fabric, gray wool torn from a jacket. It matched the description of what Colt Rivers had been last seen wearing in Wyoming months earlier. The back of the photo had 5 words, cut from magazine clippings. Your dog changed the ending. Police increased security. Surveillance was installed. But no fingerprints were found. And Milo? He started sleeping by the door again, as if he knew this wasn't over, not fully, not yet. Months later, when Clara returned to school, she had changed. Quieter, sharper, more aware of small things. Who stood too long at the gate, which cars passed twice, what Milo reacted to. But she still drew. In class, in therapy, at home. Her drawings were less childlike now, more deliberate. One day she handed her counselor a sketch. A row of pine trees, a small dog, a dark shape in the woods, and a phrase written at the bottom, "He hides from the helpers." When asked what it meant, Clara didn't answer. She just pointed to Milo, then said, softly, "He wasn't hiding. That's why I'm still here." Her counselor paused, because for all the analysts, agents, and officers who had tried to trace the logic, it had been a girl's memory and a dog's loyalty that cracked the shell, and that truth couldn't be coded or erased. In late spring, a forestry crew clearing trails north of Springvale uncovered a stretch of flattened ground, old but not weathered. Near a tree line, under half-buried leaves, was a boot print. Only one. The soil around it was frozen the night it was pressed, preserving the shape longer than usual. What stood out wasn't the tread, it was the placement. Directly facing the schoolyard fence, 100 yards from Clara's normal path home. It had been a lookout. No camera, no discarded trash. Just the footprint and a twisted length of dark green cord buried nearby, the kind used to tie down transport crates. Forensics found no DNA, no fibers, just the imprint of preparation. This wasn't a spontaneous kidnapping. It was layered, mapped, revised, and waited for. And the boot size? Large, male, US 13, the same as Colt Rivers, except Colt had never been seen that close to town. Months into the investigation, Clara recalled something simple, a small square window in the first place she'd been held, not the shed, not the cellar, a place before that. It had a smell, plastic and vinegar, and lights that buzzed. No noise outside, just humming. At first, detectives thought she was misremembering, but Milo reacted to one of her drawings, the same way he had with the trail map, a quiet alert. Agents compared building permits and utility records until they located an abandoned water treatment station, shut down 5 years earlier just outside the county line. Inside, they found a room with blacked-out glass and food wrappers identical to those found in the basement. On the wall, a list of dog breeds, a set of names, and one line circled in red. Bonded animals equals variable risk. Avoid or eliminate. Someone had been cataloging which pets fight back. Back at home, life moved forward, slowly. Clara returned to her routines, though never alone. Ryan changed jobs. The backyard was fenced higher. But Milo? He still waited by the back gate every afternoon at 3:07 p.m., the time Clara used to walk home. Even after her return, he kept the habit. Not out of confusion, but as a reminder. Some neighbors thought it was just conditioning, but Clara didn't think so. One afternoon she opened the gate early, just once, and found Milo sitting at the edge of the woods looking into the trees, not afraid, not expectant, just watching. He wasn't waiting for her. He was waiting for something else, something that, deep down, even Clara hadn't stopped sensing, that quiet tension that comes not when danger strikes, but when it waits. And Milo? He never missed when something was near. No new evidence arrived that summer, no sightings of rivers, no fresh trails. But every few weeks, something subtle would happen, a power box tampered with, a fence latch unhooked, a delivery truck parked too long across the street. Nothing overt, nothing provable. But Clara always noticed. She began journaling with her counselor, drawing less, writing more. Each page she filled wasn't about fear, it was about trust, in her instincts, in the people who listened, and in Milo. One entry stood out. They think I'm still scared, but I'm not. I'm watching too. Milo taught me how. She had turned from a target into a witness, and that changed everything. Because the girl who had vanished once was now a signal herself, the kind no network could predict, and her silence wasn't hiding anymore. It was waiting, just like the dog, the planted backpack, the stage cellar, the burner calls, the photo at the window. Every detail pointed to a larger system, not of chaos but of strategy. It depended on gaps in routine, in memory, in reaction time. But Milo had closed one of those gaps, and Clara, by surviving, had closed another. Still, there was one piece left, the man behind it all. Colt Rivers. He hadn't resurfaced, but financial records showed a small withdrawal from an ATM in Idaho. Same day, the Springvale Ranger found that second collar. CCTV, face blurred, but the gate guard remembered a dog in the back seat. White, calm, looking out the window. The guard had leaned in to compliment it, but the driver rolled up the window before he could get a good look. The plate was fake, but the tag on the dog's collar, it read, "Not Milo." Colt Rivers was never captured. Though his name appears in sealed federal documents and his photo was circulated quietly among interstate task forces, no public statement was ever made. The FBI never confirmed the prints at the water station. No official tie to Clara's case, no trial, no arrest. But those who had seen the pattern knew what they were watching for: fake IDs, leased cabins, abandoned vehicles, dogs going missing near properties he visited. And in one case, a child reported something unusual, a man offering candy, and a dog that refused to move from the child's side until the man backed off. That dog's name was also Milo. The report was filed and quietly followed up. No charges filed, but the van was impounded. Inside, they found a map with Springvale crossed out and a new town circled in red. Back in Springvale, Milo aged, his fur silvered, his legs stiffened. But every afternoon at 3:07 p.m., he still rose, still walked to the back gate, and still watched the road. Clara grew into her voice. She spoke publicly once, softly, at a school assembly, thanking her classmates for remembering she existed. She didn't cry. But when she mentioned Milo, her eyes softened. "He didn't just find me," she said. "He reminded people that I was still somewhere worth looking for." When Milo passed, the town honored him with a plaque at the school gate. It read, "For the one who refused to forget," and beneath it a photo. Clara, at age 8, holding his leash, smiling, free. Because sometimes the loudest warnings come from those who can't speak at all. And sometimes what saves a life is the one who just never stops waiting. Some stories end with answers, others end with silence. But Clara's ended with something stronger: loyalty. Milo didn't have training. He didn't need orders. He had memory, bond, purpose. And in the world behind headlines, where shadows linger and names disappear, sometimes it takes a dog to remind us someone's still missing, and I remember where they were last seen. Stories like Clara's remind us why missing person cases captivate us so deeply. When someone vanished without a trace, especially a child who disappeared walking home from school, the mystery becomes more than just a disappearance story. It becomes a testament to the bonds that refuse to break. This suspenseful missing person story shows how true crime mysteries often hinge on the unexpected. While investigators follow protocols and search teams cover ground, sometimes it's the loyalty of a dog that leads to breakthrough moments in missing persons investigations. The fact that Clara was found weeks later by following Milo's instincts proves that real-life disappearance mysteries can unfold in ways no one anticipates. What makes these vanishing cases so compelling is how they mirror the countless missing person stories that families across the world face daily. From schoolgirl disappearance cases to unexplained disappearances that leave communities searching for answers, these mysteries remind us that behind every missing person documentary is a family that never stops hoping. The emotional weight of watching someone disappear without a trace, then seeing them found after weeks missing, captures the essence of why we're drawn to these suspenseful, real stories. Whether it's missing persons solved by dogs or breakthrough moments in long-term investigations, these cases show us that sometimes the most mysterious disappearances have the most unexpected solutions. Stories of people who vanished and were later found alive give us hope that other missing person cases might have similar outcomes. While this particular mystery showcases the power of an unbreakable bond between a girl and her dog, it also reflects the broader reality of missing persons investigations, that persistence, intuition, and sometimes unconventional methods can crack even the most puzzling disappearance mysteries.